Well, I'm Becky Binder. I'm with CoreNet Global, and I'm very pleased that you're here today for today's webinar, and we thank you for attending. And I wanted to say, on behalf of CoreNet Global, a big congratulations to everyone, and thank you for being one of the speakers at the upcoming summit. I'm sure you agree it's an honor to be chosen to speak and a privilege to help your peers learn. It also carries a responsibility for being the best you can. Our vision is to make the CoreNet Global Summits the most valuable and engaging professional development investment of the year for all of our attendees to help advance the profession and our members' value to their organizations. We know that effective education is key to this vision, and the most critical component to effective education is you, the people who will be leading the education sessions at the Global Summit this year in Washington, D.C. So this session has been set up to help you advance your speaking and facilitation skills, and the information you glean and pick up is helpful not only just for the summit, but for everything you do within your career. So with us here today to lead the webinar is Dan Sunt. Dan is the President and CEO, which means Chief Experience Officer of CXO Marketing, an event design specialist that is working with CoreNet Global on the summits. He understands events and adult learning well and has designed a great webinar to help you keep engaged and provide you with at least one new concept or tool to use at your sessions. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dan.
Thank you, Becky, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. We are going to make this worth your while, I promise. At least we're going to try our best. It's a real pleasure speaking with you and experienced speakers. Certainly, you've probably got something to teach us, so we'll try and make this a two-way street as we go forward. And we will be done in an hour or less, I promise you that. One of the things that is really at the core of why CoreNet Global is kind of staging these webinars as well as working with you as presenters to kind of hone your skills and move you up the ladder is we know from research that people learn best when we are using participatory teaching methods. They retain more information when we can be better, if you will, at designing sessions that engage them as individuals and do more than just a simple lecture can do, which is, of course, at the lower end of retention in terms of the overall. So we're going to talk today both about methods that you can use to improve your presentation skills as well as design applications you can use to make your sessions more engaging and more participatory in nature. And we'll kind of explain those terms a little bit more as we go through this. And I do invite all of you to ask questions at will. You can interrupt me if you'd like to. You can raise your hand here in WebEx or use the chat window down below, and I'll try and monitor that so that if there's any time you want to stop, ask a question, make a comment, you are more than welcome to do so. We do invite that level of interaction. One of the things we know is that peer-to-peer learning is one of the most powerful things that we can do to help our people retain information. To that end, we've asked Sally Fisher, who is with us today, to talk a little bit about an experience she had at last year's Global Summit. And the reason we've asked Sally to share that is because the session design itself was highly engaging and highly participatory. And we thought that we'd let her talk a little bit more about that experience and kind of her key learnings and observations from it. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Sally. Sally, if you're there, go ahead and type right in, please.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'm just curious if we're the blue in the one circle or the multicolored in the other circle. I like that photo. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I had a chance at the last summit to participate in one of the interactive sessions that was designed, through CoreNet directly. That was asked to be one of the small group facilitators. It was very interactive, and I think people really liked it. The way in which it was set up, and it was still within our typical, I don't think it was more than an hour of a session. Maybe it was an hour and 15. It was one of the longer sessions, but this could definitely be done with a smaller group in the 45-minute sessions too, where a presenter just gave some overview of a topic, some case examples, some kind of inspirational, thought-provoking information, and then divided everybody up into 4 groups and had up on the screen questions that the groups would answer, and there were questions for each one of these areas, and I was a facilitator for the one area, and we divided them up into very small teams of just like 3 to 4 people, very intimate, gave them this question, gave them some guidance, and then let them discuss amongst themselves the answer to the question. It was highly effective in networking, fast-paced, got people to learn from one another, but still focused on a particular topic. And we rotated the groups around these 4 corners. And before each time of rotation, we just gave an opportunity for everybody in a big group setting to give a response, some of the key things that they learned or discussed. Very fast-paced, but it still kind of gave some report out to the large group, and then rotated. And I think the impact of all of that was, very energizing, high on the networking side, very focused on the topic at hand, which was how do you generate, innovative, thoughtful thinking into our workplace practices, from other disciplines, not just from within corporate real estate, but across other disciplines. It was fun. It was exciting. Very focused at the same time. And I think in many ways met all of the objectives that we're really looking for at the summit. Learning, networking, energy, fast-paced. It was great.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sally. You mentioned to me when we first talked about this, you told me a story about a particular participant who didn't necessarily want to do what everybody else was doing, but you were able to draw her out. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think the style of the session, wasn't so dictatorial that it micromanaged everybody, but it engaged people because you were on a timer and it was fast paced. If somebody started getting a bit disengaged, then it was pretty easy to bring them back in. And in that particular instance, we were on a schedule of, I think, like 7 minutes of conversation time before rotation. And, some groups would kind of finish early, and I was prepped to anticipate that and was, given some suggestions of how to kind of add to the conversation or add additional questions that they could discuss. And it worked very, very, very well. But there were other people, who clearly were kind of, getting more into the networking versus the topic at hand. And the session allowed for that very well to, again, not micromanage people, but let the energy of the room kind of sweep you up in it.
Thanks again, Sally. We know that when we can get people talking to each other at a conference, that's one of their key satisfactions. It also happens to be one of the best ways to learn is to talk to other peers and to process information kind of in the moment, if you will. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. And Sally, I'm sure everybody appreciates that you took the time to tell that story, and we do as well. So when we look at fostering engagement, we go back to that pyramid and we say, well, how do we make sure that people are indeed kind of remembering everything and retaining it? We kind of look at a continuum here where, you know, when you're presenting, especially if you're not presenting well, it's not very engaging. But when you're in a facilitated environment where people are speaking with each other and there's somebody who's leading the facilitation who's really good at it, engagement is at its highest. There are things that we can do, presentations though, to make them better, to make them more engaging, without making necessarily that jump to facilitation. And so that's really up to you folks to decide, you know, where am I on this line and where do I want to go, if you will. One of the key resources that you have available to you is CoreNet Global's speaker resource webpage. And this has been under construction for a while. It's actually has been live for a little while. And it kind of breaks it down into 3 sections. It's kind of getting started, making progress, and then gaining mastery. And each one of those has different resources under it. And I will encourage you folks to go ahead and visit this page. You're going to get from us after the webinar some links, and included in those links is a link to this page. And you should poke around a little bit because there's some really good stuff in there if you want to start playing around with different formats, if you want to understand some of the science behind presentations and facilitation and why it works better. And you see under that Making Progress tab, there's something called Adult Learning Tips and Techniques, and that's a really good PDF. It kind of summarizes some of the science and gives you some of the pointers on how to proceed with presentation design and philosophy. So a really great resource that we hope you take advantage of both now and in the future as you're preparing your sessions. So we're going to open up a poll here in a second. We're just curious to know if you have ever visited or used the CoreNet Global Speaker Resources page, and it can be yes, no, or you don't remember. So I'm going to open that poll. You should see it on your screen now, and I'm interested to see if you can, please answer if you've used the speaker resource page, or if you haven't. Please be fully honest. There's no right answers, and we're not going to track them and hunt you down or anything. I'm seeing the responses come in, and the majority are in the no category, but we do have a couple of people who have used the speaker resource page. So I'm going to go ahead and close this poll at this point. It's going to make me wait a few seconds before it actually closes it out. And now I'm going to go ahead and show you the results. So we, and it'll come up in just a second. And there we go. So the poll results are there. So 8 out of the 11 people that responded have not used the speaker resource page. 3 of you have. I hope you found it useful, and you might want to go ahead and revisit it. It has been reorganized and cleaned up a little bit. Also, we will be adding resources to this resource page, so it's something that you can come back to and use as a resource throughout the year, not just for the global summits, because a lot of what's in there is stuff that you could use day to day in your jobs to become better presenters, to do facilitated sessions there at work. So a good resource for you regardless. And with that, I'll let it go and move on. But go ahead and make yourself familiar with that resource page, and we think you'll find a lot of the resources there quite useful. So another way to look at this is kind of a continuum of expertise and engagement, and this is you as a facilitator. What we want to do is kind of meet everybody's needs, whether you're kind of a novice and you're just kind of gaining confidence with your presentation skills, or you really are great at facilitating and you want to get even better. There's a place for you both on the resource pages as well as here in today's webinar. We just want to talk to you on a level that meets your needs and meets your current expertise. So we're going to open up another poll here, and in this one, I would like you to kind of consider, and this is really for yourself, to consider, are you a novice presenter, or are you a pretty good speaker, a really good speaker, a pretty good facilitator, or a master facilitator? Don't worry about what the definitions are. Just go ahead and interpret them for yourselves, and let us know where you think you see yourself along that continuum. And I'm seeing the votes come in now. So we've got a few of them there. We'll leave this open for a few more seconds. If it were me, I would probably be answering D on this one. I'm a pretty good facilitator. I've done it quite a bit. But I've been around a lot of masters who really have a command of the room at all times and do a fabulous job facilitating. And someday I hope to get there. But for now, I've become a pretty good facilitator where I mix things up and I get people talking to each other and learning from each other. So we're going to close this poll out and we'll share the results just so you can see where your peers are. It's completely anonymous. But you can see we've got some novice and some pretty good and some pretty good facilitators as well. So thank you for that. This is one of the objectives we have for you, and we're going to explain it a little bit later, but that you have a chance to kind of self-assess where you are and therefore guide your own learning as we go. Part of learning is changing your perspective, or having your perspective changed for you. And all of us have somewhere along the line run into people that have helped us look at things a different way and come up with a different perspective. One of those individuals in my life is a gentleman named John Medina, actually Dr. John Medina, who wrote the book Brain Rules. And we had the pleasure of working with him a few years ago on a conference that I was designing. And an extraordinary individual who really helped to reframe how I look at the way we do things. Not that I was not aligned to what he was talking about, but it really put context in for it. There's lots of brain scientists out there, and as you all know, we've learned a lot more in the last 10 years about the way the brain operates than we've ever learned prior to that time. And so that to me is pretty exciting and pretty cool. What's better about Medina than some of the other scientists you might run into, at least from my perspective, is that he is, of course, brilliant, because brain scientists generally are, but he has a great way of relating his content to lay people like you and I in a very friendly way. He's actually kind of funny. He's a bit of a character, and I'm recommending that you take in his material either by reading the book or going to his website, which is brainrules.net. And interestingly enough, if you go to brainrules.net/brain-rules-video, he's got videos that explain in entertaining fashion each of the brain rules plus a few extra segments. And this is a great tool I use as well. And in fact, I go to iTunes U, and they're all resident on iTunes U as well. So you can actually download these videos and embed them in presentations and use them if you want to. The reason brain rules are so important is they teach us about how the brain operates and how it learns so that we can do a better job of designing our sessions in a way that is actually going to help people retain the information that we want them to retain and then apply it on the job when they go back to their offices after the Global Summit. From Medina and other brain scientists, CoreNet Global has developed 8 principles of adult learning, and they're here in front of us now. We'll go through them one by one in the next couple of minutes. And again, I'm wide open to questions and remarks if anybody wants to chime in. But let's go ahead and review those one at a time. The first one, in my opinion, is the most important, and it is the principle of active learning. And essentially what it says is the more you can get people to interact with you and each other during any given learning session, the better off they'll be in terms of retaining that information. So rather than structure a session as 45 minutes of lecture and 15 of Q&A, better to intersperse little pieces of interaction that people can use to process information and work with each other to try and make sense out of that information. So to me, if there's one thing that you're going to do from a design perspective is to build in some time for people to talk to each other and process the information that you've just given them. The second one is around problem solving. And think of this, one of the greatest ways to do problem solving in this kind of environment is to do it as a case study where perhaps they're given some content and then you explain, okay, here's a case I want you to work on. How would you apply this content to that problem? And if you do that kind of in the moment, just after you've given them some content or some data, it's going to help them remember that much more than if you just move on to the next slide. So problem solving is a wonderful way to keep people engaged and to make sure that they're applying and remembering information. Previous experience basically says that everybody comes to your session with prior knowledge. They've learned stuff along the way, and you are helping them to build on that learning. So the new content needs to be tied to what they already know. And one of the tricks of a facilitator is to try and understand whether it's baggage or it's luggage. The baggage is the stuff we want to leave behind, and the luggage is the stuff we want to bring with us. But regardless, try and understand where your audience is with their previous learning and connect to that learning whenever you can. This next one is the principle of relevance. It's number 4 of the 8. And for you folks, this one is pretty easy. You're going to be talking about corporate real estate to a corporate real estate audience. These people just need to know that what you have to say is relevant to their day-to-day. And I think for most of you, that is probably the case. The 5th principle is the principle of emotional connection. And what brain science tells us is that when emotions are engaged, memories are much more vivid. If you think about your most vivid memories, the best experiences of your life, you will undoubtedly come back to heightened emotions during that experience. I'm not suggesting that you gratuitously paste up pictures of babies and puppies in your presentation as I have, but I am suggesting that you find a way to take your content and draw it back to human impact. Tell stories. You know, when we did this is what happened with people and their productivity and their satisfaction. And I got an email from so-and-so telling me how much that meant to them, et cetera. The more stories you can tell, the more emotional connections and contexts you can set up, the better off they will be, your participants, in terms of learning. Because with heightened emotions comes heightened retention. The principle of self-learning is the 6th one, and this really says that people have an opinion about how they learn. Some people might tell you, I don't want to participate, I really just want to sit back and listen because that's how I learn. I like lectures. And that might be true in terms of what they like, but in terms of effectiveness, it truly is not. So it's up to you to do your best to kind of understand how people learn, to make sure that to the extent you can, you're mixing in different levels of media so that you're addressing auditory needs as well as visual and kinesthetic needs. And more so when you're going to do something that might be a little bit out of the norm, you're going to explain to people why it is that you do it before you do it, so they have a chance to become a little bit more comfortable with that particular learning method. The 7th is the principle of alignment. And this one really just says that you've made a promise in your session description, you've outlined 3 learner outcomes, and to make sure that your entire session is really aligned to that promise, that you're delivering on the promise that you've made. When people go to a session, you've probably all been to at least one conference session where the content had nothing to do with the description that you saw in the brochure. And when that happens, what's called cognitive dissonance, and you check out. And when your learners check out, you're done. So this one really just says make sure that your session content is aligned to the description and the promises that you've made in terms of learner outcomes. And finally, perhaps the second most important is to have fun with this. Have fun designing these sessions and make sure that you're building fun into the sessions to the extent that you can. If people are active and having fun, again, that means their emotions are high and they're going to learn more. So in review, active learning. Get people working with each other, get people talking to each other, ask people questions. Have them solve problems applying the content that you've just given them. Make sure that you recognize their previous experience and how you're going to build on stuff that they've already learned. Certainly make sure that your content is relevant to both the profession and the people that you know who are in the room. Build emotional connections wherever you can. Help explain to people who have perhaps some reticence about participating, why it's important that they participate and how it will affect their learning. Make sure that your session is aligned to the promises you've made, and then, of course, have fun with them. At this point, we're going to just take a pause, and I want to make sure that we address any questions that might be out there. So I will invite you to either chime in via voice or use the chat window here in WebEx. Feel free just to throw out any questions, comments, or clarifications that you're looking for. We've gotten through the first part of our content. I just want to make sure that we take time to breathe and give you guys an opportunity to ask questions if you have them. Right now would be a good time to play the Jeopardy theme. All right, great. We're going to go ahead and move on. Please do interrupt at any point if you do have any questions or comments. Coming back to this continuing expertise and engagement, the next section kind of deals with that first step, gaining confidence in your presentation skills and honing those presentation skills in a way that's meaningful to your participants. We have what we call the high five. The first one is the rule of 3. The second one is less is more. Third is the 10-minute rule. Fourth is video record your rehearsals. And fifth is mix in stories and emotion. If you don't facilitate at all during your session, but you include these techniques in your preparation and your delivery, you will do a better job of engaging your audience than if you didn't. So let's go through these 5 real quickly, and we'll talk about them as individuals. The rule of 3 is supported by Brain Rules video that covers rules 5 and 6, and it's called Memory, Repeat to Remember. So I suggest that you go ahead and go to Medina's website and watch that video if you're interested. But really the gist of it says we need to repeat things in order to remember them. If you put out a piece of data or information and you say it once, they won't remember it. And therefore, you need to say it 2 or 3 times, and hopefully you can get them to say it to each other and process it so that they are repeating it often enough to remember. So the rule of 3 says, if that's the case, then I really need to focus my presentation around 3 key things. So you've got 3 key learner outcomes that can help you guide this. But make sure you use those as filters. And when you're editing your slides, when you're editing your content to make it shorter and fit the time that you need to, use the rule of 3 as a guiding light to make sure that you are indeed sticking to those 3 things. For instance, when we designed this section, our 3 were, we wanted you folks to understand why CoreNet Global is moving more towards active or participatory learning. We wanted to create self-awareness and critique of your own skills as a presenter or a facilitator. And we wanted to encourage commitment of adopting at least one new concept, idea, strategy, or tactic that you can use in your sessions in 2014 in DC. So that's the rule of 3. Less is more really kind of plays off of that, but we really talk more about the visual side of things. And a great video for this one is for rule number 10, that vision trumps all other senses. And in this video, which is highly entertaining as well, but eye-opening, Nadina really talks about how difficult and time-consuming it is for brains to decode text and make sense out of words. Whereas if you can communicate the same information with fewer words, fewer characters, or preferably images and videos, you will do a much better job of communicating what it is you're trying to communicate. And they will appreciate that as people who don't have to read slides. So we've got a few guidelines on this one when we think about less is more. First of all, no cue cards, folks. I think, again, we've all been in sessions where people are reading their slides, and there couldn't be anything more boring or in the world. So avoid the temptation to put the script on the screen. If you must use words, boil them down to very key 1- or 2-word phrases that help trigger what will then be an ad-lib for you. And it'll be a lot easier for them to process. Just as a rule of thumb, so limit your use of text and don't do anything less than 32 points. The folks in the back of the room simply can't read it. Communicate pictorially. You have seen throughout this presentation several images that were picked primarily for their ability to communicate a single concept or a single word. And so it takes a little extra time to do this, but it does so much for your audience when you can tie a concept to an image and then use that image in a meaningful way. So you probably remember what we were doing for all 4 of those images earlier in the presentation. So when you have the time, communicate pictorially. You can find free images out there. Compfight.com is one. If you want to just Google Creative Commons, Creative Commons says as long as you acknowledge the rights holder to that image in your presentation, you have use of it free and clear. And then, of course, there are any number of sites where you can go out and buy images pretty inexpensively for these applications, usually only $1 or $2 a piece. And they can go so far in terms of helping you communicate and helping your participants remember. Next one is to tell stories and establish big picture context before showing graphs, charts, and data. And this one really says if you're going to dive into some heavier data-driven content, it really makes sense and helps people take it in better if you can tell a story or provide big picture context before diving into that data. That way they have a chance to make more sense out of it and tie it back to human impact before they see it. And by all means, do not show charts that look like this. If you're going to use charts, and many of us must, try and make them as clean and bold as possible. Your audience will appreciate it rather than trying to read an eye chart. So summarizing, for the graphic support pointers on less is more, no cue cards. Limit your use of text as much as possible, 1 or 2 keywords, 1 or 2 key thoughts per slide. Never anything less than 32 points. Communicate pictorially. Stories in big picture context before data. And simplify everything, especially charts. By now you've noticed that we are using the repeat to remember rule in this webinar. So yes, we are repeating information because we want to remember. Next one is 10-minute rule. This one's really interesting. It comes out of the video first. When you first open up a session or a classroom, you've got their attention. They are on high alert, but almost no matter what you do, in about 10 minutes, you will have lost most of their attention. You can be a great presenter, and this will still happen. So the lesson in this one is to do something every 10 minutes to mix it up and to recapture your participants' attention. What do, you might ask? Well, no more than every 10 minutes, do one of the following things. Stage an audience interaction. have them talk to each other or do something or solve a problem. Take the content that they've just learned and process it, if you will, in a small group setting. Tell a story, give big picture context. We just talked about this one. This is one of the best ways to do it. If you think about your presentation in 10-minute segments, we open each segment with a story that goes back to human emotion or human impact. Ask a question. You could ask a question of the individuals or small groups if you wanted to. You might say something, I want you to think to yourself about how you will apply this in your own business, and write down the 3 ways that you want to apply this concept in your own business. Now, talk about it as a group. Again, what you're trying to do is get them to talk to each other, which is highly satisfactory because they love to network for the most part, and you want them to process the information that you give them in the moment so they have a better chance to remember it. Show a video, play music. Basically, you want to play with the senses. I like to bring toys with me to my facilitated sessions so that people have something to do with their hands. Studies show us that the more senses that can be engaged while we're in a learning session, the more likely we are to retain that information. So pretty much anything you can do with the senses. If all else fails, do something. Stand on a chair and sing. Do something, anything, every 10 minutes. The big lesson here is chunk your presentation into short, digestible pieces of 5 to 10 minutes long, and then mix in other things between those pieces of content to give people the opportunity to process and remember. So that's the 10-minute rule. The next one is video record rehearsals, and this one's a little bit tricky because what it assumes is that you are rehearsing. Not all of us rehearse. Some of us see rehearsals as a luxury. I see them as a necessity. And this is from experience. At any time I rehearse something, I get about 10 times better on the first rehearsal. And then I'll get about 3 times better on the second rehearsal, and then maybe just a little bit better on the third rehearsal. So the big message here is rehearse your content. You're going to get so much better at it. You're going to find things that you didn't realize were there, rough spots that you can smooth out, different ways to talk about things, maybe tweaks to your slides. When you go through that process, it's incredibly powerful in terms of the way it can transform your session and your delivery. And boy, if you video record that rehearsal and then watch it, you're going to learn even more, and you're going to become a very good critic of yourself. Most of us don't like to watch video or hear ourselves, but it's such a good learning tool. Finally, and again, mix in stories and emotion. This one we just can't say enough. It's so critical to learn when you can really contextualize information and data and put it into stories and emotional contexts that help people remember. We know that when we tell stories, and by the way, the advertising industry has taken off with this concept because they've done a bunch of studies around it. And what it says is that when you're just taking in a presentation or a lecture, you have 1 or 2 parts of your brain that are actually active or lit up on an fMRI. But when you tell a story, you are engaging several centers of the brain, making that story much more memorable. The other thing that's kind of cool is called neural coupling, which basically says the storyteller and the listener, when you put them on an fMRI machine, their brains look very similar while that story is being told. Whether they're the listener or the storyteller, the same thing is happening inside their head. So talk about getting people on the same page. Stories are a great way to do that. So here they are again, the rule of 3. Keep it focused on the 3 main things that you want them to remember. Less is more, especially with graphics. We want to be as visual, clean, and punchy as possible. The 10-minute rule, which says chunk your presentation into digestible pieces and do something different every 10 minutes. Rehearse, and if you can, video record those rehearsals and watch them. And mix in stories and emotion. If you don't facilitate anything, and you do these 5 things, you will have a more interesting and more engaging presentation, which is what we're looking for at the end of the day. So with that, I'm stopping again, and I'm inviting questions. Again, you can feel free to use the chat window, or you can open up your microphone and blurt it out. We are here to help, so if you've gotten lost or you have comments or questions, now's the time to ask those. All right. With that, we will move on. And again, anytime you want to ask, please ask. So by review, the 8 principles of adult learning on which we're building all of the strategy for CoreNet Global is the principle of active learning, where you get people doing things together with each other and as an active participant in a learning session as opposed to passively listening. Problem-centric, we're going to give them problems to solve, applying the content that we've just talked about. We're going to understand their previous experience and their prior learning, and we're going to connect our content to their prior learning. We're going to make sure that everything we do is relevant to the industry as well as their role in their organizations. We're going to do our best to create emotional connections so that their emotions are heightened and they learn more. We're going to understand different learning styles and try and meet those learning styles head on. And when we do something that is different, we're going to ask people to participate, and we're going to explain to them why that's important. We're going to make sure that we stay aligned to the promise of the session, and we're going to have fun. So those are the 8 principles of adult learning. The high 5 we just hit, so the rule of 3, less is more, 10 minutes rehearsals and stories and emotion. Those are pretty fresh in your memory, but we're repeating them again and again. We want you guys to remember this and hopefully use it in your session design and session delivery. I talked earlier about using the images. Here are the attributions for the images we used in this presentation. And the top 2 I actually did find on compfight.com, COMPFIGHT.com. And that is a Creative Commons site where you can find both free photos and paid for photos. As a really nice search tool so that you can type in a word and it brings up a bunch of images that it thinks relates to that word. So if you've got a concept you need an image for, plug that concept or that word in, it's going to bring back a bunch of images. You can browse them. And for the most part, as long as you attribute that photograph to its rights holder, such as Deposit Photos, it is legal to use and you do not have to pay any fees. And some of them you will have to pay a fee, but again, you can find them for $1 or $2, and CompFight has paid for photos as well. So here's the official credits for this presentation, so that we remain legal. And with that, we open it up to a final Q&A and or any comments that you all have. Again, we are happy to take your comments now or questions. And if you have anything that happens and want help after this session, please feel free to reach out to Angelina or Becky, and they can also engage me as needed. Okay, we just had a question that came in from Sally. It says, I wonder about the value of the materials. I understand that during the presentation, the visual principles proposed here make a difference, but I find when I look at presentation materials of a session I can't attend, I find it disappointing with the presentation really can't be followed or there is little leave behind value. What are my thoughts? Great question. So a lot of conferences do what they call handouts, and a handout is essentially a PDF or a paper copy of slides. And if a presenter has done their job well on the slides, it will be very difficult to understand the context of the slides because they're using images and then kind of building meaning in as they go along. So my thoughts on leave behinds like that are they are very frustrating if you haven't attended the session. I think that kind of leave behind has more value for people who were in the session because then they've got the triggers already built into their brain. I prefer to do printed materials, essentially workbooks that people can track with as they go through a session. And if people want to go and take in a session that they were not able to live, I find the best way to do that is through a recording of that session. It takes a little bit longer and they're not always available. Sally, I hope that answers your question. It's a really good one. And if anybody else has thoughts on that, about your participation. And again, feel free to open your mic up if you do want to ask a question verbally.
This is
All
Sally.
right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Sally, go ahead.
I appreciate the answer. I think that's a really good one. I'm just wondering if, CoreNet should be providing any guidance because, we can't all attend all of these sessions. And I think I might not be the only one that have an expectation of being able to learn something without necessarily having to attend the session. I don't know, maybe there might be something to provide some guidance to, how to create really great presentation materials for use in the room as you're talking about, but also some content that can, have longer value beyond just the immediate interactive session. Just a thought.
Great thought. I'm going to let Angelina or Becky chime in on that if they want to, and then I'll provide an additional perspective after that.
Hey, Sally, we do put the presentations on the Knowledge Center online, but if they're more visual than not, then maybe what we need to be doing is if they're asking for either some kind of an executive summary or to have some of the if there are notes built into it, have that part visible as well.
Oh, that's a great idea. Fabulous idea. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and one thing that I always encourage is for people to include links as much as possible so that if people want to dive down into information and get a little bit deeper on where it came from, they can go ahead and access stuff that's not actually in the deck, but perhaps supported the deck and it gives it greater context at that point. So it's a great question, and you're not alone in that one, Sally. That's I hear that one a lot.
We also added to the print program in the back a special page for key takeaways and for writing down some action plans and some things that could be implemented.
And there's one other technique that doesn't actually go to the handouts, but one of the things that I always like to do, and many conference participants do it, is to find a learning partner, somebody who is going to go to different sessions than you, and that you get together with them at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day over coffee, and you kind of review the sessions that you've gone through together and help each other learn about the ones that you won't be able to go to. And you can open those up to be 4 or 5 people if you want to. And that helps to contextualize the information in a more meaningful way, I think. Okay, it's time for our final poll, and we're interested in hearing your brief impression about this particular session. So I'm going to open the poll now, and we're interested to know how you found today's webinar. Was it great and exceeded your expectations? Was it very useful with at least one idea or concept I can use? Was it somewhat useful but not much new information? Or just a complete waste of your time? So if you could answer that question, that'll make us a little bit more aware of where we were and where we go. I'm seeing about 50% have chimed in so far on this question. So we'll give it a few more seconds before we close it out and say goodbye to everybody. Most of the responses are on B, very useful, with at least one new thing, which is good. And we've got a couple in one in A and one in C. So I am going to go ahead and close this poll out while one more came in. All right, thank you very much. And for those of you who answered somewhat useful, please go ahead and provide some written feedback, if you don't mind, on how you think it might be improved. Because we want to make sure that these things work for you. These are really designed to help you guys become better so that participants learn more, really value their time at the Global Summits. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Becky for a final goodbye. And thank you once again for everybody's participation today.
And thank you, Dan. And we're very pleased that all of you have participated on this webinar with us. As Dan said, if there's anything we can do that you think about after the webinar, please drop an email to Angelina or myself. We'd be glad to help out and appreciate all that you're doing to make the summit a great success. Thank you.